Hey everybody, this is Dustin, Urban Specialist, and as you know, I've been beating this coach up to death, but I just want to do a quickie on holding tanks. Fresh tank, black tanks hid out over there, gray tank, right? So if you are posting or seeing all the posts on Facebook and social media and you're like, hey, I'm so pissed off, my holding tank fell out, those manufacturers, they did a horrible job, right? And I'm not protecting the manufacturers, because as you all know, I do lawsuits on the side. So, but if you also didn't know, I turn a lot of them away because a lot of them are consumer, screw ups. So I wanted to talk about holding tanks and the brackets real quick. Here's an example. This is basically what I'll refer to. I'm trying to guide through paper or through wires. This is what I refer to as an end bracket, right? It looks like an end. This bracket is bolted in place. And so you can see those two bolts over there on that side. So that's bolted in place, that carries the weight, and there's an edge that rests on top of that. And it's a pretty good wedge, it's probably, say 1.5 inches or so that rests on top of that end, right? So that's bolted in place. Now, on the back side, there's an L bracket. And so the example is, here's an L bracket, right? And you can see that they've used like a nylon stop right here with a bolt to prevent the tank from sliding more this way. Well, this tank has been sliding back and forth, and there's marks on the bands in the center that show that. And I did that in another video as well, right? So these brackets are typically either welded in place or bolted in place, right? So when you overfill your tanks, what happens is this tank expands downward, breaks these straps that are sitting in there. And as you can see, there's no screws in there anyways, but it breaks the straps that are in there, forces the tank to balloon upward, to expand like this. When that does that, what do you think that does to those brackets? It's twisting them, it's bending them, it's breaking them, it's shearing off the bolts. It's putting pressure and force on it that it doesn't need. And then, you're traveling and say you have a bunch of water, right? Well, that water sloshing back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and creating more forces and pressure, right? So it's always a good idea to not travel with as much water as you don't have to. Fill it up halfway, get to where you're going, go fill it up again or whatever, right? For dry camping. Or just don't carry any at all until you get to where you got to go, and as you get close by, go get it. But if you're traveling and you lose a tank because it's been overfilled, that's why, so people say, oh, my tank fell out and something broke loose. And recently there was a lady that talked about, she's smelling fumes and stuff in her coach and she suspects it's from the tanks. When you overfill these tanks up and they expand, on the top of the tank, there's a fitting that's either there's a hole drilled in it, and it's a squished rubber cone that gets glued in place, usually with dichlorolapsilin or alpha lapsilin. It gets squished in place, it flares up, and it basically bites the edge of that circle all the way around. So it's like a lip. It's a double ring that's sliding onto it. And so when that can pop out because the tank is now expanded, or it'll be what we call a spin weld. And a spin weld is a fitting that is spun in and heated up plastic to plastic, so that can break, or the threads of the pipe that go down in it can break, and then you'll have, gray smell, black smell, fresh smell, whatever, right? So this is a spin weld, right? Oh, sorry. That's a spin weld. So if you see how there's like that plastic there, that's a spin weld, right? That's also your freshwater gate valve too, so you can drain your tanks. Same thing with down here. Let's look at, when people say, hey, inside this tank, there's a collar that we put on all of them, and this is industry standard type stuff. So see, somebody took and they gooped up where the sensor goes to protect it. But that's a spin weld, that's a slip fitting that goes in there to protect the tank. Then it's got a reducer on it, which it goes from a 3-inch down to 1.5 inches. Then there's your dump valve, right? And then it carries on from that pipe from that other flange on the opposite side. So these pipes can leak right there between those two gaps. So where they're sandwiched right here, where the bolts go through, they can leak there, they can leak over here, they can leak over here, they can leak from all the fittings on the sensors that are over here. So you see all the sensors See how the bottom of that sensor is not sealed all the way in that one? They've started selling those because those are a rubber plug that go inside the tank, and those rubber plugs, you know, it's rubber, and so we put chemicals and pee and urine and solvents, and, or not solvents, but, you know, bleaches and all this other crap that everybody's putting on there online, that dries up those sensors, causes them to shrink, and it's a well nut, so when it shrinks up, now it lets it start dripping and leaking inside the coach. So that's a great idea to use the silicone on there like Grand Design did on this one. People always ask about, you know, the tank heaters. So this little bitty pad, which, you know, can see how big my hand is, that little strip is what's there to help keep that water warm, to keep the tank from quote unquote freezing. Yeah, they work so okay, I guess. People talk about, you know, hey, my cable is hard to pull. Well, this cable comes clear down here, goes clear down there, takes and makes a big ass U-turn, and it comes out over here. So they're hard to pull open and close. You know, whenever we're getting down here and we're doing tank repairs and stuff, a lot of times we're moving cables around and repositioning them and getting them to where they're not messed up. You can see over here where the heating duct's at. That's the vent that's just vented down. It's actually resting on top of another pipe, so we need to correct that when we get back in here. Here's one that's cut off. So if you're wondering, like, hey, you know, where's the air going? It's going down here to help warm the tanks to keep this underbelly dry. This coroplast, you know, it's basically got a heat reflectant. We'll cut it on one side, which is basically like a tinfoil, right? And it's just plastic, right? So you can see all the dirt, and you can see water and stuff that's got in here in the past, things that are, you know, rusted and fell down, you know, areas like that. All your wiring is just usually floating around in here. Sometimes there's a ton of extra wiring like this. Look how long all that is, right? That's going to be, I believe, to the sensor back there. So for the leveling jack system. So like all that stuff, you know, could have been tied up better. You got a bunch of wires that are just floating around in here. Same thing. Grommets and things could have been tied up better. But going back to the tanks, again, I get sidetracked real easy. I got too much going on in this noggin. If you are overfilling the tanks, you can damage the brackets, they'll fall down. Freshwater tanks, right? I want you to think of this as like a fishing fish bowl, right? Or a fishing tank, right? You got a fish tank at your house, or you had one as a kid. These tanks get all nasty and slimy. You know, we're putting water in from all different places. We're traveling all over. We're getting well waters and all different kinds of chemicals and stuff from different parts of the United States. And then you're using different filters, sometimes a good one, sometimes a cheap one. Well, when these tanks get all nasty, like a fish tank, it's creating bacteria and slime. So it's good to do a freshwater flush on them. It not only cleans the tanks, but the water lines too. You know, a lot of times we'll take a water line like this. This one's a 5/8. It's not a 1/2 inch standards for a drain overflow. And we'll take a Q-tip and we'll shove it up in the hole and pull it out from a pipe or a fitting. And we'll show customers like how nasty it is inside. That's the 1/2 inch lines that are in there. And again, that's the dump for the tank, right? These seals go bad too. So it's a good idea every so often to check those, open and close them too, just to exercise them, to which you should be doing to drain the tanks. You know, so anyways, hopefully some of this information helped. I know I skipped all around, and as we get doing more of these, I'll put more information and more, you know, I'll get more into different things. But the main topic on this is don't overfill the tanks, right? You can see the swellingness of this tank from the strap. See how much it's bulged, right? What does that tell you? Dustin, I've overfilled my tank. Same thing with this one's a little bit swollen too. The pipes, you know, the gray pipes. You know, and this one is the one that I said that had like basically 12 cracks that we identified, but I think now we're probably up to like 14 or 16. So, all right, well, stay tuned for more. And you can see too, just the angle. Look at that bracket in the leg, right? Where it just ripped that sucker. So, and the angle of the brackets too, and the angle of that bracket, you know, it bent. So anyway, stay tuned for more. Hope these videos help you, and I will quit nagging at you, and just make sure the takeaway is, do your maintenance, do your suspension maintenance, do your freshwater tank maintenance, clean your gray and black tanks, check all your sensors, check all your stuff every once in a while. If you've never been underneath here, when you ever have the opportunity, because at some point you will have to get in here. This is a serviceable area that you want to get in and make sure that there's no rodents that got in here, that there's nothing chewed up, that there's nothing leaking. Sometimes we'll put different colored dyes in the 3 tanks and let it set and see if we see any leaks. Sometimes we'll take and wrap all the fittings underneath here with RV toilet paper and a piece of Scotch tape to see if we see anything that got wet, because if it does, it'll immediately show. You can even see that beam right there is twisted at the end where it buckled. So we're basically broke here. So, all right, well, hey, thanks again for watching and have a great day. This is Dustin, your RV specialist.